hospital hallway that should have been safe becomes the scene of a shocking crime when the husband's mistress, disguised as a janitor, slips into the maternity ward and lifts the newborn from his crib while the mother lies helpless on the operating table. They think no one will notice. They think their secret will vanish in the dark, because the husband, stripped of every trace of humanity, quietly helped her carry out the plan. But what they do not expect is that this mother will rise, and her father, a retired FBI investigator, will drag every hidden truth into the light. What follows is a battle of betrayal, obsession, and cold, unforgiving justice that shakes an entire city. Tell us what time you are watching and where you are tuning in from. Drop a comment below. We would love to hear from you. The cold rain over Seattle had not stopped for hours, and the wind pressed harshly against the windows of St. Mary's Medical Center. Inside the brightly lit operating room, Emily Warren lay still on the table as the surgeons finished the last stitches of her emergency C-section. It was 2:13 in the morning. Her vision blurred from exhaustion and anesthesia, but she caught one fleeting glimpse of her newborn son before the nurses lifted him into a warm bassinet. His tiny cry echoed once, soft and brief, before her eyes closed again. When Emily was wheeled into the recovery room, the fluorescent lights created a soft halo above her. The bassinet was placed only a few feet away, close enough that she could reach it if she tried. The nurse adjusted the blanket around Emily's shoulders, checked the baby monitor, and said she would return after processing the medical reports. Emily managed a faint nod. She was drifting in and out of consciousness. The medication still weighed heavily on her muscles, slowing every movement and thought. Minutes passed quietly. The hallway outside hummed with the low static of night shift activity. A distant cart rolled somewhere near the nurse's station. Then the overhead lights flickered once, so lightly that it could have been dismissed as nothing, except it was followed by the sound of wheels, a low rubber scrape on the floor, steady and careful. Emily opened her eyes halfway. Her body felt heavy, and the world seemed to tilt from side to side. She saw a figure entering the room. The person wore a dark green janitorial uniform with matching gloves, a cap pulled low over the forehead, and a face mask covering everything but the eyes. A large industrial trash cart rolled ahead of the stranger, its black lid resting half open. For a moment, Emily thought this person was staff, but something felt wrong. This janitorial worker moved too quietly, too deliberately. The stranger pushed the cart beside the bassinet and paused, glancing at the door as if listening for footsteps. Then the figure lifted the lid of the cart fully, revealing the empty space inside. There were no trash bags. The entire interior was lined with folded blankets. Emily's breath hitched. Her fingers curled weakly around the blanket on her lap. She tried to lift her head. The person turned, and though the cap and mask hid most of the face, Emily recognized the eyes immediately. They were cold, dark, and filled with something like triumph. It was Sienna Blake. Emily's heart lurched. She forced her body to move, but her limbs were slow and uncoordinated. "What are you doing?" she whispered. The words barely formed. They slipped out like broken pieces of sound. Sienna stepped toward the bassinet without answering. Her movements were smooth and practiced, as if she had rehearsed them. She reached down, slid her hands beneath the newborn, and lifted him gently. Emily's breath shattered into frantic gasps. She clawed at the bed rails, trying to pull herself up. "No, no, please, stop." Her voice trembled with fear and physical agony. Sienna leaned forward slightly. Her eyes softened in a strange, chilling way. "He does not belong to you," she murmured. "Not anymore." Then she lowered the baby into the trash cart, onto the blankets, and closed the lid softly until it latched shut. Emily screamed, but only a cracked sound came out. She tried to swing her legs over the bed, but the pain from the incision tore through her. Sweat pooled on her forehead. She reached out blindly, desperate, helpless. Sienna pushed the cart toward the door. Before she slipped out, she whispered again, "You will forget all of this. You will think you imagined it." Then she was gone. The wheels faded down the hallway. Emily's vision swam. She tried to reach the call button on the side of her bed. Her hand trembled uncontrollably, but she managed to hit it. The alarm chimed through the corridor. Seconds later, Adam rushed into the room. His hair was disheveled, his breath quick, and his face twisted into an expression that looked like shock. But to Emily, something about his eyes felt wrong. Too controlled, too calculated. "She took him," Emily cried. Her voice cracked and broke. "Sienna! She was here! She took our baby!" "Oh!" Adam grabbed her hand and shook his head quickly, almost too quickly. "Emily, you are still under the medication. You are confused. There is no way she could be here. You must have dreamed it." "No, I saw her. She wore a janitor uniform. She had a cart. She took him. She took him." Emily's tears soaked the pillow beneath her. Adam kept denying everything, trying to soothe her with words that only made her panic worse. "You are exhausted. Please calm down. Our baby is safe." The staff probably moved him. Before he could continue, the nurse rushed back into the room with 2 security officers. She looked at the empty bassinet and froze. The officers scanned the room and immediately initiated the hospital's infant alert protocol. Alarms rang throughout the floor. Automatic locks clicked into place on every stairwell door. The nurse checked the electronic logs. "No one moved the baby," she said with rising fear. "There was no transfer order." Now, security accessed the hallway camera on a small monitor mounted on the wall. The footage showed a janitor figure pushing a large industrial cart out of the maternity wing. The image was grainy, but the outline of the uniform was unmistakable. Emily collapsed back against the bed, sobbing in devastation. Adam stood behind the officers, his face pale. But his expression was unreadable. Not grief, not horror, something far more guarded. The search began. Doors slammed open. Radios crackled with rising urgency. The entire maternity floor erupted into chaos as the staff realized a newborn had been taken right out from under their watch. Emily stared at the empty bassinet, her chest heaving with pain and fear. Her voice was barely audible as she whispered to herself, "He is gone. Someone stole my baby." And I saw everything. The heavy truth settled around her like a suffocating fog. Her child had been kidnapped in the middle of the night, and nothing would ever be the same again. The rain continued through the early morning, tapping softly against the hospital windows as the chaos from the abduction began to settle into a tense, watchful silence. Emily lay in her recovery bed with her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Her body ached from the surgery and from the desperate attempt to stand moments earlier, yet her mind refused to rest. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the janitorial uniform, the dark cart, and the quiet determination on Sienna's face. She pressed a trembling hand to her forehead, trying to force her memory to move backward toward the moment before the anesthesia pulled her under. There had been shadows near the door. A faint reflection of green fabric. A mop handle leaning against the wall in a place where no mop should have been. Emily tried to focus on the details, but her mind felt like fog swirling over frozen water. The images flickered, incomplete, but she knew she had not imagined them. A nurse entered with a tablet in hand, her expression tight with worry. She checked the IV line, asked Emily about her pain level, and tried to comfort her, but her hands were shaking. Emily watched the nurse move around the room, waiting for her chance to ask the question that burned inside her. When the nurse finally stepped closer, Emily whispered, "Did you check the cameras?" The nurse hesitated. "Security is reviewing everything," she said softly. "But there is a complication." A blank. Emily felt her stomach tighten. "What complication?" The nurse swallowed hard. "All video from 2:05 to 2:15 is missing. The system shows a complete blackout." She lowered her voice. "The baby disappeared during that window." Emily stared at her, stunned. "How does 10 minutes disappear?" "We do not know yet. The IT team thinks the system might have glitched, but that has never happened before." Emily knew what her gut already feared. It was not a glitch. Before the nurse could answer, Adam stepped inside the room with an anxious expression that looked more practiced than genuine. His voice was low and gentle. "Emily, you need to rest. You are still recovering. The doctors say stress is dangerous for you right now." Emily watched him closely. She studied the way his hands kept shifting, the way he avoided looking at the empty bassinet, the way his jaw tightened every time someone mentioned the cameras. Something about him felt wrong, yet he kept repeating soft phrases meant to calm her, as if she were fragile porcelain that needed to be wrapped and hidden away. "I heard you," Emily said suddenly. Her voice quivered but held strength. "Earlier, on the phone." Adam stiffened. "What are you talking about? You said someone went in too early." That she was supposed to wait for your signal. Emily's eyes filled, but she forced them to stay open. Who were you talking to? Adam's face emptied of color. He turned his back as if adjusting his coat, but Emily saw his shoulders tense. Emily, you were coming out of anesthesia. You misheard. I was talking about a work issue. Emily shook her head. No, you were whispering. You did not want me to hear. He turned back toward her, forcing a calm he did not feel. You are exhausted. Please, do not do this to yourself. This is not the time. Emily's pulse quickened. She was sure now. Something was deeply wrong. She no longer recognized the man standing in front of her. She wanted to push harder, to demand the truth, but her body was too weak and the fear too sharp. A different nurse entered the room, checking a clipboard. Emily seized the moment. Can you tell me something? Were any janitors scheduled to clean this wing tonight? The nurse blinked. No, not between 1 and 3 in the morning. Cleaning staff is restricted from maternity during nighttime hours, unless specifically requested by medical personnel. She paused, confused. Why do you ask? Emily let out a choked breath. Because I saw one, right before my baby was taken. The nurse's eyes widened. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she exchanged a tense look with her colleague. Emily watched the fear travel from one face to another, confirming what she already knew. Something deliberate had happened. Something that could not be dismissed as an accident or misunderstanding. Outside the room, radios crackled with scattered updates. Officers were moving through every hallway, checking stairwells and utility rooms. The soft buzz of hospital alarms pulsed like a dull heartbeat. Emily could hear every sound. Each noise made her chest tighten further. She felt trapped within her own body, unable to stand or search herself, forced to rely on people who seemed unsure or overwhelmed. She tried again to remember the moment before the surgery, the mop, the green uniform, the quiet movement near the door. She had been lying on the gurney, drifting from consciousness, and she remembered thinking that someone was watching her. At the time, she dismissed it as nerves and medication, but now it returned with frightening clarity. She had not imagined anything. The person had been real, and they had been waiting. Her breath trembled as she whispered. She was planning it even before they started the procedure. Adam looked at her sharply. That is not true. Emily met his eyes with a steadiness that surprised even her. Then why was someone in a janitor uniform outside the operating room? Adam opened his mouth, but no answer came. His silence settled heavily between them. Emily felt the walls closing in around her. She knew she had to stay alert. She knew she had to remember every detail before it slipped away again. The hospital lights hummed softly overhead. The rain pressed against the glass. And beneath all of it, the truth continued to grow, dark and unavoidable. Someone had taken her child. Someone had wiped the cameras. Someone had entered the maternity ward with purpose. And Emily could feel the truth tightening around her like a rope. She was not dealing with a simple kidnapping. She was standing at the edge of a plan far more deliberate. And she knew deep in her bones that the next answers would not come easily. The sun had not yet risen over Seattle when the hospital's security office finally restored part of the corrupted footage. A few officers gathered around the monitor, their faces tight with exhaustion. Emily sat in a wheelchair near the door of the room, wrapped in a blanket that did little to stop the trembling in her hands. Her incision hurt, but the deeper wound was the emptiness in her chest. She felt hollowed out, both physically and emotionally, as if someone had carved a space inside her and left it to echo. The lead officer cleared his throat. Mrs. Warren, we managed to retrieve a portion of the hallway recording. You should see this. His voice was gentle, but the tension in it made Emily's stomach twist. Emily gripped the armrests as he pressed play. The video showed the maternity hallway at 2:16 in the morning. The lighting was dimmed for the night shift, casting long shadows on the floor. A tall figure in a green janitorial uniform pushed a trash cart down the corridor. Her posture was straight, confident, almost graceful despite the heavy cart. She moved without hesitation. Not once did she stop to look around. Then the officer zoomed in on the face. Emily's breath stopped. She knew those eyes, even behind the mask and cap, even distorted slightly by the grainy resolution. The camera did not lie. No matter how much Emily wanted it to, it was Sienna Blake. Her pulse hammered, her throat tightened. She had hoped she was wrong. She had hoped the drugs were confusing her memory. But the truth stared back at her from the screen with terrifying clarity. Sienna Blake. The woman who had once been obsessed with Adam. The woman who had tried to sabotage their relationship years ago. The woman who had told Emily during her pregnancy that some mothers are not meant to be mothers. The woman Emily had prayed would disappear from their lives forever. That same woman had walked into the hospital in a stolen uniform and taken her baby. Emily covered her mouth as a sob escaped. "It is her. I knew it. I knew I saw her." Adam stood a few feet behind her, his arms crossed tightly against his chest. His face was pale, and for a moment he stared at the screen without blinking. Then he shook his head too quickly. "There must be some mistake. That cannot be Sienna. She would never do something like this." Emily turned toward him slowly. "How can you possibly say that? You know what she has done before. You know how she followed you. You know what she said to me when she found out I was pregnant." Adam's jaw tightened. He looked away. She had problems, yes, but she would not kidnap a child. Emily stared at him, searching for something in his expression, a flicker of honesty, a sign of genuine fear. But instead she saw something she had begun to recognize all too well since the abduction. Evasion, careful calculation, the shadow of a truth he refused to speak. One of the officers stepped forward. "Do you know this woman personally?" Emily answered before Adam could respond. "Sienna used to have an obsession with my husband. She showed up at his office. She showed up at our home once. She told me I did not deserve him. She made comments when I was pregnant." The officer wrote quickly. "Did she know you were giving birth last night?" Emily felt a coldness settle in her bones. "No, she should not have known. The surgery was unplanned." The officer nodded. "Which means someone told her." The room seemed to freeze. Adam's shoulders tensed, his gaze flickering nervously to the floor. Emily noticed. So did the officers. But she said nothing yet. The lead detective replayed the footage from a different angle. This time, the timestamp appeared clearly at the bottom. 2:03 in the morning, 13 minutes before Emily's emergency procedure began. Sienna was already inside the hospital, walking calmly toward the maternity wing. She entered the elevator and pressed the button that led directly to the restricted floor. Emily whispered, She knew the exact time I would give birth." Her voice trembled with anger and grief. How did she know? No one answered. Another clip showed Sienna stepping out of the elevator at 2:08. She glanced down the hallway, then adjusted the mask on her face. There was no hesitation in her movements, no uncertainty. She had rehearsed this. She knew exactly where she needed to go. Emily closed her eyes, fighting back a wave of nausea. She was waiting for me. She was already here before the surgery even started. Adam ran a hand through his hair. This is absurd. Someone must have given her access somehow. Someone from the cleaning staff. You cannot jump to conclusions. Oh. Emily turned toward him, her voice sharp. I am not jumping to anything. She walked straight to my floor. She walked straight to my hallway. She did not wander. She knew exactly where the operating rooms were. One of the officers looked at Adam. Sir, did you contact Miss Blake recently? Adam hesitated. No, of course not. Emily caught the lie. It passed across his face like a shadow. She knew that look. She had seen it before, years ago, back when he first admitted he had kept things from her during Sienna's first intrusion into their lives. That same hollow glance was back again. The officers exchanged a subtle glance. Emily felt her breath shaking, but her thoughts had never been clearer. Sienna had not acted randomly. She had not guessed the timing. She had not found her way into a highly restricted floor without help. She had an accomplice, and Emily knew without a doubt that the truth was closer than anyone wanted to admit. She faced the screen again, watching Sienna disappear into the elevator with her cart. Her pulse thudded in her ears. The helplessness she had felt in the recovery room shifted into something sharper, something stronger, something determined. Her baby had been taken. Her life had been torn apart, and the woman on the screen was not working alone. Emily knew it, and soon, so would everyone else. The call reached Walter Hayes just before dawn in Texas. He had been awake already, unable to sleep since Emily went into emergency surgery earlier that night. When he heard his daughter's trembling voice on the voicemail saying that her baby had been taken, something inside him broke open. He did not waste a second. Within an hour, he was on the next flight to Seattle, still wearing the jacket he had grabbed on his way out of the house. The entire flight, he sat rigid in his seat, staring ahead as if holding himself together through sheer force. His daughter had always been strong, but the terror in her voice reminded him of how small she once looked the first time she fell off her bike. Now she had fallen into something far darker. When he arrived at St. Mary's Medical Center, the air smelled of disinfectant and rain-soaked concrete. Officers filled the corridor. Nurses hurried with worried faces. Walter walked through it all with the firm steps of someone who had spent his entire life moving inside crisis. He stopped outside Emily's room, placed a hand briefly on the doorframe, then entered quietly. Emily lay in the bed with her eyes swollen and red. Her voice cracked when she whispered, "Dad." Walter crossed the room and held her hand gently. "I am here now. You are not alone." She clung to his fingers. "She took him. She took my baby." Walter's jaw tightened. "I know. I am going to help you. We will get him back." He spent only a few minutes with her before stepping outside to speak with hospital security. He was polite, measured, but his presence demanded respect. Even without his badge, he carried the aura of an investigator who had spent decades dissecting lies and tracking criminals. The head of security briefed him quickly. "We have reviewed the primary cameras. 10 minutes of footage are missing, completely gone." Walter frowned. "Systems like yours do not lose 10 minutes by accident." The officer exhaled heavily. "We thought the same thing, but the server logs show no sign of forced access." Walter nodded slowly. "Where are the backup cameras?" The officer blinked. "Backup cameras?" "Yes, the auxiliary feed. This hospital received a grant 6 years ago. It included a secondary recording system that runs on a separate loop. Where are those files?" Recognition spread across the man's face. "You are the donor." "Just show me the footage," Walter said. They led him into a small security room lined with screens and humming equipment. A technician pulled up the auxiliary feed. The footage flickered for a moment before stabilizing. The timestamp read 2:16 in the morning. Walter stepped closer. The hallway appeared, dim and quiet. Then a figure in a janitorial uniform entered the frame, pushing a large trash cart. Emily had described this scene, and Walter's chest tightened at the sight. He watched the figure move with calm efficiency, her posture unhurried. Even through the mask, the outline of her eyes carried a cold certainty. "Sienna Blake," the officer confirmed quietly. Walter said nothing. His eyes stayed on the screen. The woman in the uniform reached the elevator lobby. She pressed the button. The doors opened, and someone else stepped into the frame. Adam Warren. Walter felt a chill crawl through him. Adam walked toward the elevator at a steady pace. He stopped briefly as Sienna pushed the cart inside. Their faces were partially obscured by shadows, but what happened next could not be misinterpreted. Adam nodded. A small, subtle gesture, quick but unmistakable. A nod that spoke of recognition, not surprise, cooperation, not confusion. Walter's face turned to stone. He made no sound. He did not move. He only watched as the elevator doors closed with Adam standing there, his hand briefly lifting as if adjusting his sleeve. The gesture looked harmless, yet combined with the nod, it was enough to confirm what Walter already feared. Adam was not a victim. He was involved. The technician shifted uneasily. "Sir, that looks intentional." Walter did not reply. His long career had taught him how to hide reactions, how to think even while his world shifted violently beneath him. He inhaled slowly, letting the breath ground him. Then he rewound the footage, watched it again, watched the nod, watched Adam's stillness, watched the timing. "Has anyone else seen this?" Walter asked. "No," the technician said. "Only us in this room." Walter's voice hardened. "Good. Keep it that way." The head of security frowned. "Do you want us to inform your daughter?" Walter turned toward him, his expression sharp. "No, not yet. She just survived surgery. She is barely holding on. If she hears this now, it will destroy her." The security chief swallowed. "What do you want to do?" "Lay." Walter looked back at the frozen image on the screen. Adam's face, Sienna's cart, the elevator closing. A picture of betrayal so precise it made Walter's blood simmer. "We build the case," he said quietly. "We gather every piece of evidence, and we do not give Adam the slightest hint that we know." He stepped out of the security room, the weight of what he had seen heavy on his shoulders. Emily needed protection. She needed truth. She needed someone who would not break under pressure. Walter had been many things in his life. A detective, a father, a fighter, But at that moment, he became something sharper, something colder, something he had not been in years. He became an investigator again. As he walked back to Emily's room, he kept his face calm. She looked up at him with hopeful eyes, desperate for reassurance. "Did you find anything?" she asked softly. Walter sat beside her and brushed her hair back gently. "I found enough to know that we are going to get him back." He did not tell her the rest. Not yet. In the hallway outside, the rain continued tapping against the windows, but Walter Hayes felt something shift inside him, something steady and unwavering. He would follow every clue. He would uncover every lie, and Adam Warren's nod would not stay hidden for long. Walter Hayes left the hospital with a purpose burning through every step. Years of investigative instinct sharpened his senses as he moved through the damp Seattle air. The morning clouds were heavy and gray, pressing down on the city like a lingering threat, and he felt the weight of them settle on his shoulders. Somewhere in this city, his grandson was alive. Somewhere, a woman in a stolen uniform was hiding him. Walter knew he did not have the luxury of waiting for the official channels to catch up. His daughter needed action now, not paperwork. He pulled out the small folder he had taken from the security office. Inside was a printout of the tracking frequencies used by the hospital's industrial carts. Each cart was equipped with a radio frequency chip, so staff could locate them during fire drills or emergency sanitation. Walter knew that if Sienna had used one of those carts, she might have left a signal trail behind her. Most people had no idea how long technology could remember their movements. He opened his laptop in his rental car and connected to a scanning device he kept for emergencies. Retirement had not softened him. He still believed in being prepared. The scanner picked up several dormant signals around the hospital, but one pinged faintly near the edge of the industrial district. The frequency matched the range used by the janitorial carts. It was weak, almost faded, but still there, like a whisper leading him forward. Walter drove toward the warehouse blocks on the south side of the city. The buildings here were old and scarred by years of rain and wind. He slowed as he approached a narrow alley between two abandoned structures. The signal grew stronger. At the end of the alley sat a small apartment building, the kind of place where people lived when they did not want to be found. The windows were dark, the metal doors scarred by rust. He climbed out of the car and approached quietly. There was no sound inside, no movement. He pressed his hand against the door, felt the chill of the metal, then used the old lock tool he always kept in his coat. The lock clicked open with a familiar ease. He entered cautiously, stepping into the dim interior. The apartment smelled of bleach, dust, and stale air. Heavy curtains blocked out the daylight. Walter scanned the space with trained eyes. Nothing was random. Everything told a story. A stack of takeout containers sat in the trash, dated within the last week. A pair of gloves lay on the table. A janitorial cap hung on the back of a chair. He moved deeper into the room and saw the thing that tightened his chest. A crib. It stood against the wall, assembled neatly and lined with fresh bedding. Next to it sat a folded blanket with a hospital logo printed on the corner. Walter walked toward the crib slowly. He touched the fabric with his fingertips. It was soft, clean, prepared. But the crib was empty. His jaw clenched. He told himself to stay calm. Sienna had been here. She had planned to keep the baby here. That meant she had stayed long enough to prepare this place. She had not acted out of impulse. She had acted out of certainty. Walter scanned the room again and opened a drawer near the crib. Inside, he found something that made his stomach turn. Photographs. Dozens of them. Some were of Sienna alone. Others were of Sienna and Adam. They were smiling in some, whispering in others. One photo showed Adam holding a gift bag with pastel colors, clearly for a baby. Another showed Sienna touching her stomach in a way that mimicked motherhood. He set the photos down and found a small flash drive taped to the bottom of the drawer. He plugged it into his laptop. A video file opened. The screen flickered, then Sienna's face appeared. She held the camera close, her voice soft and trembling with excitement. "Adam said everything will be fine," she whispered. "He said once I bring the baby here, we will start our family. He promised me this. He promised that this was finally our chance." Walter froze the frame. The betrayal was now undeniable. This was not a moment of weakness from Adam. This was coordination. This was planning. He continued watching. "I followed the schedule he gave me," Sienna continued. I memorized everything. The nurses, the cameras, the cleaning routes. Adam said he would open the door at 2:15. He said that was when the hall would be clear. Walter shut the laptop, his heart clenched with a father's fury. Adam had orchestrated this. He had guided Sienna. He had allowed his own child to be taken from the woman who trusted him. Emily's anguish replayed in Walter's memory, and something inside him tightened into a vow. He moved into the small kitchen and found a notepad on the counter. It contained lists written in Sienna's handwriting, surveillance schedules, the maternity shift rotation, the exact time Emily was taken for preoperative preparation, a rough drawing of the hospital's floor plan, and a route marked with arrows showing Sienna's path to the exit. This was no hurried scheme. This had taken weeks. Walter gathered everything. He photographed the crib, the uniform, the notes, the photos. He documented every detail with the precision of a man who knew evidence might be challenged later. Then he placed the flash drive and notepad inside his coat. As he stepped back outside, the cold wind swept across the alley. The sky was still heavy, but a faint light appeared behind the clouds. Walter looked upward, breathing deeply. The investigation was no longer about suspicion. It was now backed by fact. He drove straight to the FBI field office. When he entered, the agents recognized him immediately. His reputation still held weight. He placed the evidence on the table. The room fell silent as the agents examined the video and the notes. "This is coordinated," the supervising agent said. "Adam Warren is involved." Walter nodded. "I want everything done by protocol. No missteps. My daughter has lost enough." The agent closed the file slowly. "Then let us bring them both down." Walter exhaled for the first time since arriving in Seattle. The hunt for the truth had officially begun. Morning light crept through the narrow blinds of Emily's hospital room, though it did little to brighten the heavy air inside. Her body was weak, but her mind was alert now, in a way it had not been the night before. She had spent the last hours replaying the footage that Walter showed the FBI, imagining the nod Adam gave to Sienna, imagining the betrayal that had unfolded behind her back. Pain radiated across her abdomen with every breath, yet none of it compared to the thought that her own husband had helped steal their child. The door opened softly. Adam entered with a folder in his hand. His expression was carefully arranged into concern, though the edges trembled with strain. Emily watched him silently. She had learned to study the tiny details, the twitch near his eye, the rigid way he held the papers, the controlled breath he took before speaking. He pulled a chair close to her bed. "Emily, I talked to the doctors," he said in a gentle voice. "They think it is important for you to avoid unnecessary stress. They gave me a document that can help settle everything with the hospital. It is very standard." She stared at the folder. "What kind of document?" "It is a postnatal risk acknowledgement." He offered it to her carefully. "It states that unforeseen complications can happen during childbirth. If you sign it, the hospital will have more resources freed up to help find the baby. It is just protocol." Emily reached for the folder with an unsteady hand. She flipped it open, scanning the lines. Her breath stopped. The document said nothing about helping. Instead, it suggested that the disappearance of her child was an unpredictable complication. It asked her to confirm the hospital was not at fault. It asked her to agree that no staff member acted negligently. It asked her to accept the event as a possible medical anomaly. Her eyes lifted slowly. "You want me to sign this?" Adam exhaled. "It will make everything easier." "For who?" Emily asked quietly. "For me or for you?" He hesitated. "Emily, please. You are in pain. You are exhausted. The hospital is under pressure and they need clarity." Her fingers tightened around the edge of the folder. "Clarity would be knowing where my son is, not signing away the truth." Adam looked frustrated now. "You are emotional. You do not understand how these things work." She forced herself to sit straighter, ignoring the sharp pain in her abdomen. "Do not talk to me like I am fragile. Our son was taken. I will not sign anything that buries that reality." His jaw clenched. "Emily, this is the best option." She closed the folder and placed it on the table beside her. "No, this is the best option for you." Adam stood abruptly. His composure cracked for a moment before he smoothed it back into place. "You are paranoid. I am trying to help." Emily turned her face toward the window, refusing to acknowledge his words. The conversation was over. She knew it. He knew it. A knock sounded at the door. 2 FBI agents stepped inside. "Mr. Warren," one of them said, "we need to ask you a few questions. Please step into the hallway." Adam's shoulders tensed. "Is this really necessary right now?" "It is," the agent replied. He followed them out, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Emily listened. She heard bits of conversation through the thin walls. Adam's voice rose and fell. Then, the agent's tone shifted into something firmer. Moments later, the door opened again, and one agent returned. "Mrs. Warren," he said, "we conducted a preliminary search of your husband's vehicle earlier this morning. We found some items you should be aware of." Emily's pulse quickened. "What did you find?" "Len." The agent pulled out a small evidence folder. "In the trunk, we located a hospital staff badge with a fake employee number. We also found unopened janitorial gloves, a printed map of the maternity sanitation routes, and a note on his phone indicating a message that read, 2:15, I will open the side door." Emily felt the room tilt. Every breath became heavier. "You are sure these belong to him?" "Yes, the items were in his personal vehicle, and there is more." He took a breath. "We reviewed additional footage from the auxiliary cameras provided by your father. Another angle clearly shows your husband handing an access card to the suspect outside the NICU." Emily closed her eyes. Her throat burned. She had suspected the truth, but hearing it confirmed cut deeper than she imagined. The agent continued gently. "We want to question him further, but we need your statement confirming whether you saw him contact Miss Blake during your pregnancy or after." "Ray." Emily opened her eyes, steady now. "He received messages from her. He hid them. He denied everything. He told me I imagined things. He told me Sienna would never do something like this." The agent nodded. "Thank you, that helps." When he left, Emily sat back slowly, pressing her hand against her chest, as if trying to steady the pieces of her world. She remembered the way Adam had looked at her after the birth, the way he tried to silence her fear, the way he insisted she was confused. None of it had been comfort. It had been control. Her father entered moments later. He saw her pale face and approached immediately. "What did they tell you?" "Everything," she whispered. "They found his badge, his gloves, his maps. They saw him give her the card." Walter's expression hardened. "I am so sorry you have to go through this." Emily shook her head. "I need the truth, Dad, even if it hurts." Walter sat beside her. "The truth will help us bring him down." "Hon!" Emily's eyes filled, but she did not look away. Her voice was quiet but firm. "He took my child from me. I will not stop until everyone who helped him faces justice." Walter nodded. "And you will not be alone." Emily turned her gaze toward the empty bassinet in the corner. The grief was still there, but something new had grown beside it. Resolve. Determination. The fragile woman who had cried through the night was still hurt, but she was no longer helpless. Her son was out there, and now she knew exactly who she was fighting against. The morning clouds hung low over Seattle, as journalists gathered outside St. Mary's Medical Center. Microphones glinted under the pale sunlight, cameras pointed toward the hospital entrance, and a quiet rumble of anticipation spread through the crowd. Everyone had heard the rumors. A newborn taken in the middle of the night, a security failure, a missing 10 minutes of camera footage. No one expected the mother to speak publicly. No one expected her to stand at the center of the storm. But Emily Warren stepped through the entrance with a steadiness that surprised even herself. She wore a simple hospital robe beneath a coat someone had draped over her shoulders. Her face was pale, but her eyes were sharp and bright, no longer lost in confusion or grief. Walter walked beside her, offering silent support, but she was the one leading the way. The crowd hushed when she reached the small podium set up by the hospital gates. The wind carried the scent of wet pavement, and the murmurs faded as Emily gripped the sides of the podium. "My son," she began, her voice trembling for only a moment, "was taken from me inside this hospital. He was taken by someone disguised as a cleaning staff worker, and I have reason to believe that the person who helped her knew exactly what they were doing." The reporters leaned in. Flashbulbs exploded like distant lightning. Emily continued, her voice growing firmer with each word. "I saw her," she said. "I was coming out of anesthesia, and I saw a woman in a janitorial uniform standing next to my baby's crib. She lifted him and placed him inside a cart, She wheeled him out of the room while I could not move. And no one should ever have to live with the memory of watching their child disappear in front of them. A wave of emotion rippled across the crowd. Somewhere behind the cameras, someone gasped softly. Emily inhaled, trying to steady her breathing. She knew this was not only about telling the truth, it was about making sure no one dismissed what had happened to her as a mistake, a glitch, or a confusion caused by medication. She would not let her voice be washed away. She continued, "The hospital told me there were no janitors scheduled during that time, and yet someone dressed as one walked straight into the maternity ward without hesitation. She knew where to go. She knew when to go. She acted with complete confidence." Maid? The reporters raised their hands, shouting questions, but Emily lifted her hand, and they fell silent. "There is more," she said. 10 minutes of camera footage were wiped from the main system. 10 minutes. The exact 10 minutes during which my baby disappeared. A murmur surged. People shook their heads in disbelief. "But a secondary camera feed was not wiped," Emily said. "That footage was restored, and it shows the truth. You..." She gestured to Walter, who stepped forward and connected a small tablet to a portable screen. The crowd watched as grainy video played. A woman in a green uniform pushing a large cart, a masked face, a steady stride. And then, unmistakably, the image of Adam Warren approaching the elevator. The elevator doors opened. The woman with the cart entered. Adam turned slightly and nodded. The crowd erupted. Reporters shouted Adam's name, shouted accusations, shouted questions about motive and involvement. Emily stood still, her face expressionless, her eyes fixed on the screen even as flashbulbs burst around her like fireworks. Walter paused the video on the exact frame where Adam's head dipped. It was subtle but clear, a silent agreement, a sign of cooperation, a betrayal frozen in pixels. Emily gripped the podium again. "He said he was helping me," she said softly. "He told me I was confused. He insisted that I must have imagined things, but I remember what I saw. And now the cameras confirm it." Her voice grew steadier. "I will not be silent about what happened. Not for his reputation, not for the hospital, not for anyone." A reporter shouted, "Mrs. Warren, Adam Warren claims he was manipulated by the suspect. Do you believe that?" Emily shook her head once. "No, I believe what the evidence shows." Another voice followed. "Do you fear retaliation?" "No, I fear nothing more than losing my son forever," she answered. The crowd settled. Even the reporters looked moved by the raw honesty in her voice. Emily straightened her shoulders, ignoring the ache in her abdomen. She felt something rise inside her. Strength, resolve, a fire lit by everything she had endured. "I want to speak directly to every mother and grandmother watching this," she said. "If this happened to your child or your grandchild, would you accept silence? Would you accept excuses? Would you accept missing footage? Because I will not. My baby deserves more. Every child deserves more." A wave of applause spread through the onlookers. Some people even wiped tears from their faces. Emily felt the support surrounding her like a protective shield. At that moment, Adam stepped through the hospital doors, escorted by security. Reporters swarmed him. Microphones shoved toward his face. He raised his hands. "I had nothing to do with this," he insisted. "Sienna threatened me. She forced me. I was afraid she would harm my wife." He attempted a sympathetic expression, but the video above him painted a very different story. The reporters pounced. "Why did you give her the access card? Why did you nod? Why were janitorial gloves found in your trunk?" Adam's words tangled. He stammered a string of excuses, none of them coherent. He looked trapped, cornered not by law enforcement but by the truth displayed behind him. The FBI agents stepped forward and addressed the press. "We can confirm that the male subject seen in the video is under active investigation for complicity in the abduction." The crowd roared again. Emily turned back to the microphones. "I will bring the truth to the surface," she said calmly. "For my son. For every family who has ever been told to stay quiet." The strength in her voice cut through the noise like a blade. Reporters stepped back, almost reverent. With the cameras still rolling, Emily ended the conference with one final promise. "I will not stop until my son is returned to me, and I will not stop until everyone who stole him from me faces justice." She stepped away from the podium. For the first time since the night of the surgery, she felt like she was moving towards something instead of sinking beneath it. She was no longer the mother who watched helplessly as her baby was taken. She was the mother who was going to bring him home. The forest of the Olympic Peninsula was colder than usual for that time of year. Mist clung to the tree trunks like pale fingers, drifting low across the damp ground. Sunlight struggled to break through the canopy, leaving long pockets of shadow that felt untouched by the world outside. It was in this gray silence that the FBI convoy rolled to a stop, engines humming softly as agents stepped out and surveyed the landscape. Walter stood among them, his breath forming faint clouds as he watched the agents assemble their equipment. The signal from the hospital's radio chip had led them here, a narrow clearing hidden deep in the forest, a place almost deliberately chosen for isolation. The faint trace of the signal had grown stronger over the last hour, guiding them along old logging roads until they finally reached the location. At the center of the clearing stood a small cabin. The wooden planks were weathered and darkened with age. Moss crept along the base of the walls. A thin ribbon of smoke drifted from the chimney, though the air felt cold. Walter narrowed his eyes. Someone had tried to make the cabin appear abandoned, but the signs of activity were unmistakable. The supervising agent approached Walter. "Your lead was right. The signal is inside." Walter nodded once. "Then she is there. And so is the baby." The agents moved into formation. Drones hummed to life, lifting into the air and gliding silently above the cabin. One drone fed live footage to a monitor. The camera zoomed in through a cracked window. Inside, a faint figure rocked back and forth in a chair. The room was dim, lit only by a single lantern on a crooked table. Walter leaned in closer to the screen. Sienna sat in the chair, swaying rhythmically. She wore the same green janitorial uniform she had used at the hospital. Her face was pale and drawn. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, fixed on the tiny bundle in her arms. She whispered to the infant in a soft, cracked voice. It was not a lullaby, it was something else. A ramble of broken phrases that blended into the eerie quiet of the cabin. The baby moved slightly. A small hand curled outward. Walter felt his chest clench. "That is him," Walter said quietly. "That is my grandson." The drone shifted its camera angle, scanning the area around the cabin. Tire tracks were visible in the dirt, pressed deep into the mud. The supervising agent zoomed in on a fresh pattern. "We have movement," he said. "Another vehicle arrived earlier, not long ago." As he spoke, the faint rumble of an engine echoed through the trees. Walter turned sharply. A truck emerged from between the pines. Its headlights were dimmed. The driver slowed as he approached the cabin. "Adam." Walter felt his jaw tighten. The drone zoomed in on him. He stepped out of the truck cautiously and walked toward the cabin with hurried steps, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone to follow. In the drone footage, Walter saw him open the back door of the truck. Inside were several items: a heavy duffel bag, a blanket, a map of back roads, supplies for travel, supplies for escape. The supervising agent muttered, "He is helping her get away." Walter exhaled slowly. "Record everything. We need this evidence." Adam approached the cabin and knocked lightly on the door. Sienna did not respond. He tried again. The door creaked open under his hand. He slipped inside. The drone camera followed through the window. Inside, Adam whispered urgently to Sienna. She clutched the baby tighter, shaking her head violently. Her voice rose into a frantic plea. Adam reached forward, trying to calm her. But the panic in her movements only grew. Walter's hands curled into fists. "Move in," he said. The supervising agent gave the command. Agents advanced swiftly and quietly, surrounding the cabin. They approached from every angle, moving between the trees like shadows. Their weapons were drawn, though pointed downward. The priority was the infant. No mistakes could be made. When they reached the cabin door, the lead agent signaled. Two others positioned themselves at the back window. Another drone hovered above the roof. The door burst open. "FBI, do not move," Sienna screamed. She grabbed the baby and stumbled backward, clutching him against her chest. Her eyes burned with panic and desperation. Adam jumped, his face draining of color. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Walter stepped forward behind the agents. He saw his grandson's small face peeking from the blanket and felt a surge of emotion shake him to his core. The agents moved in slowly, hands raised in calming gestures. "Sienna, stop," one of them said gently. "Put the baby down. You will not be harmed." Sienna shook her head. "He is mine," she cried. "He belongs with me. She does not deserve him. She does not love him like I do." Her voice cracked. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She looked more like someone drowning than someone fighting. Adam took a step toward her. "Sienna, please. They will hurt you. Give me the baby." Walter saw the lie in Adam's face. He saw the calculation, the desperation to salvage himself. But Sienna recoiled from him, clutching the baby tighter. "No," she whispered. "You promised. You said we would take him and go. You said we would be a family." The words echoed through the cabin. Adam's expression collapsed. The agents seized the moment. One moved swiftly behind Sienna while another reached from the front. Sienna turned too late. They gently but firmly took the baby from her arms. The infant cried once, a soft sob of confusion. Walter felt the sound ripple through him. Relief washed over him with such force that his knees almost gave out. "Secure her," the agent ordered. Two agents grabbed Sienna as she fought wildly. "He is mine!" she screamed. "He was supposed to be mine!" Adam attempted to run. He bolted toward the back of the cabin, but drones picked up his movement instantly. Agents intercepted him before he reached the trees. He fell to the ground, crying out as they pulled his hands behind his back. The supervising agent lifted the child carefully and turned toward Walter. "He is safe," he said. Walter reached for the baby. His hands trembled as he held the tiny body close. The child's warm cheek brushed against his. Walter closed his eyes, exhaling a breath he had been holding since the night of the abduction. "Contact Emily," he said softly. "Tell her we found him." Outside the cabin, the forest remained silent, as if honoring the moment the night finally gave back what it had stolen. The federal courthouse in Seattle filled long before the sun rose. Reporters lined the marble steps, with cameras balanced on their shoulders. Elderly couples held thermoses of coffee as they waited in the cold morning air, whispering about the case as if it were a national tragedy rather than a single family's nightmare. Inside the building, the courtroom buzzed with energy. Every seat was taken. Every hallway echoed with speculation. It was the kind of case America did not forget easily, and the nation had followed each development as if the infant belonged to all of them. Emily walked into the building with her father beside her. She held her son tightly against her chest, wrapped in a soft blue blanket. The baby slept peacefully, unaware of the storm that had surrounded his first days of life. Emily kept her chin lifted, though exhaustion still lingered in her features. She was no longer the woman who had woken alone in a cold hospital bed. She had transformed into someone steady and unbreakable. The courtroom doors opened. Emily took her seat behind the prosecution's table. Across the aisle, Adam and Sienna were escorted inside in separate cuffs. Adam looked pale, almost sick. He avoided Emily's eyes. His suit hung awkwardly on him, as if he had lost weight under the pressure. Sienna, on the other hand, looked wild. Her hair was unkempt. Her eyes darted around the room with a frantic, unstable energy. When she saw the baby in Emily's arms, she gasped and lurched forward before officers restrained her. Judge Holloway entered the courtroom, and the room fell silent. His voice carried the gravity of decades on the bench. "You may proceed." The prosecution stood first. Screens were lowered, and the evidence began to appear piece by piece. The drone footage played to a room drawn into total silence. Adam stepped from his truck. He approached the cabin with hurried steps. He opened the door. His voice could be heard faintly through the microphone on the drone, telling Sienna to calm down and prepare to leave. The next video appeared. Adam handing the NICU access card to Sienna outside the maternity ward. The camera angle was clear, and the gesture undeniable. Gasps filled the room as the frame froze on their faces. Then came the evidence from Adam's car. The hospital badge with a false employee number. The fresh janitorial gloves still in their packaging. The printed sanitation route map. The message on his phone. 2:15. I will open the side door. The jury watched without blinking. The footage from Sienna's hidden apartment appeared next. The crib, the uniform, the ultrasound photos, and finally, the video of Sienna whispering into the camera that Adam told her they would be a family. Her voice shook with devotion and delusion. She spoke of destiny. She spoke of love. She spoke of promises Adam had made. The courtroom remained completely still. When the prosecution finished, Judge Holloway turned to the defense. Sienna leapt to her feet before her lawyer could speak. "He is my son!" she screamed. "He was supposed to be mine! She does not deserve him! She abandoned him the moment she passed out." Her lawyer attempted to quiet her, but Sienna continued shouting. "Adam said I could have him. He said we were meant to raise him together." Officers restrained her again. Some jurors flinched at the raw intensity of her voice. Adam stood next. His voice shook as he addressed the courtroom. "I was afraid," he said. "Sienna threatened me. She manipulated me. She forced me to give her the card. I thought she would hurt Emily if I didn't help. I only wanted to keep my family safe." The prosecution rose calmly. "Then why did you bring escape supplies to the cabin?" Adam faltered. "I panicked, Lee." "Why did you nod at her outside the elevator?" "Misunderstanding." "Why did you attempt to flee as officers approached?" "I was overwhelmed." The questions continued until Adam's shoulders slumped and his voice faded into a whisper. No one in the room believed him, not even his own attorney. Finally, Emily was called to the stand. She handed the baby to her father and walked slowly to the witness chair. Her steps were careful, not weak, but deliberate. The courtroom watched as she placed her hand on the Bible and lifted her face toward the jury. She began quietly. "I woke up from anesthesia, unable to move. I saw a woman in a janitor's uniform holding my son. I watched her place him in a cart. I watched her take him away. I could not even lift my head to call out. I could not protect him." The courtroom held its breath. Emily continued. "For days I wondered if I had dreamed it. Adam told me I had imagined everything. He told me I was confused and emotional. He made me believe my own memories were unreliable." Her voice strengthened. "But I remember, and the cameras remember, and now you have seen what I saw. I could not run after my son that night. I could not stand. I could not even cry loudly enough for someone to hear me. But today, I can run toward the truth. And I can ask this court to help protect the child I brought into this world." Several people in the courtroom wiped their eyes. Even the judge paused for a moment before nodding. The jury left to deliberate. They returned in less than 2 hours. The foreperson stood. "We find the defendant, Sienna Blake, guilty on all counts. We find the defendant, Adam Warren, guilty on all counts." Judge Holloway delivered the sentences in a steady voice. "Sienna Blake is hereby sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. No consideration for parole will be granted before 25 years. No." Sienna screamed as officers held her down. Her voice cracked into a cry of pure anguish. "Adam Warren," the judge continued, "is sentenced to 28 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 18 years. Adam closed his eyes as if the floor had dropped beneath him. His entire body sagged. The courtroom watched the final collapse of a man who had betrayed his own family. Officers placed cuffs on both defendants and guided them out of the courtroom. As the doors closed behind them, the entire room rose to its feet. Not for the prosecutor, not for the judge, but for Emily. Walter handed her the baby. She held her son against her chest as the room applauded in a wave of quiet respect. Justice, at last, had spoken. The courthouse steps were still crowded with reporters when Emily finally stepped outside with her father and her son. Cameras flashed. Voices called her name from every direction, and yet the noise felt distant, as if it belonged to a world she no longer lived in. Emily held her baby close, breathing in the warmth of his small body. She felt his tiny breaths against her collarbone, steady and soft. For the first time since the night of the surgery, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of relief. Walter placed a protective hand on her back as they walked to the waiting car. The driver opened the door, and Emily slid inside carefully, making sure the baby was nestled securely in her arms. The moment the door closed and muted the noise outside, she released a long breath she had been holding for days. It felt like opening a window in a suffocating room. The car pulled away from the courthouse, leaving behind the chaos, the verdict, and the broken remnants of the life she once shared with Adam. She rested her cheek against the baby's head, inhaling the faint scent of powder and milk. She whispered softly to him, though he slept through every word. "We made it," she said. "You are safe now." Walter watched her from the opposite seat. His expression carried pride, exhaustion, and something deeper, a quiet gratitude that his daughter had survived something few people could imagine. "You were stronger than anyone in that courtroom," he said. Emily offered him a tired smile. "I had reasons to be strong." They drove straight to St. Mary's Medical Center, the place where the nightmare had begun. The hospital looked different now, calm, peaceful. The morning sun washed over the glass windows, casting warm reflections on the pavement. The air smelled of fresh coffee from the cafeteria downstairs. It was strange, Emily thought. A place that had felt like a battlefield only days earlier now felt like a sanctuary. She stepped inside, letting the familiar scent of antiseptic surround her. It no longer felt cold or threatening. It simply felt like a place where she had survived. She walked down the hallway, passing nurses who recognized her immediately. Some nodded respectfully. Some looked away with tears in their eyes. All of them understood the weight she carried. When she reached the maternity wing, she paused. Her fingers brushed the doorframe of the labor and delivery room. She remembered lying there, helpless and terrified, watching her baby disappear. She closed her eyes briefly. The memory still stung, but it no longer had the power to crush her. Not now. Not after everything she had reclaimed. She leaned forward and placed her palm against the door. "Goodbye," she whispered. It was not a farewell to pain, but to fear. It was a promise that she would never again let someone silence her. Walter touched her shoulder gently. She turned to him and nodded. Together they walked to the pediatric unit for the final checkup. The nurse greeted them with a warm smile and led them into a quiet exam room. The pediatrician entered moments later, flipping through the chart. He examined the baby carefully. He listened to the heartbeat. He checked the breathing. He looked at the small hands and feet with practiced precision. Finally, he closed the chart with a reassuring smile. "He is perfectly healthy," he said. "You have a strong little fighter." Emily exhaled shakily, tears gathering in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for everything." As she walked out of the hospital, sunlight poured through the entrance in a golden stream. She stepped out into the brightness and blinked against the sudden warmth on her face. What she saw next made her stop in her tracks. A group of older men and women stood outside the hospital entrance. Some held small signs that read, "Justice for Baby Warren." Others simply stood with their hands clasped. Several of them had followed her story from the beginning, watching every news update and supporting every truth she uncovered. When Emily stepped outside, they began to applaud softly. A woman in her 70s stepped forward. Her white hair was pulled into a neat bun. Her eyes held the kind of gentleness that reminded Emily of her grandmother. The woman reached out and touched Emily's hand. "You fought for your child," she said. "You fought for every mother and every grandmother who ever felt powerless. You spoke for all of us." Emily felt tears gather again, but this time they were warm, not heavy. "Thank you," she said softly. "Your support meant more than you know." The woman smiled. "We knew you would bring the truth into the light." Emily embraced her briefly, then stepped toward the car where Walter waited. The applause continued, gentle and respectful. She placed her baby in the car seat, making sure the straps were snug and comfortable. Walter held the door open as she climbed in. As they drove away, the supporters waved, their faces bright beneath the morning sunday. The drive home was quiet. Emily watched the city pass by the window, each street and building washed in soft gold. She felt as if the world had opened again, welcoming her into a life she once feared she had lost. When they reached her house, she stepped onto the porch and inhaled the crisp morning air. She walked inside, carried her son to the living room, and then stepped out onto the small balcony that overlooked the quiet neighborhood. The sun had fully risen, painting the sky in shades of peach and pale orange. She lifted her baby gently, holding him against her shoulder. His eyes opened slightly, blinking up at the morning light. She kissed the top of his head, feeling the warmth of his tiny body against her chest. The world felt new. The world felt possible. She looked toward the horizon, her voice soft but steady. "We survived the darkest night," she whispered. "Now we live for the light." The morning sun wrapped them both in a gentle glow as the world finally returned to peace.